You haven't lost your mind. You've lost your direction. Focus doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes. Slowly. Quietly. One distraction at a time. One half-finished thought at a time. One morning where you sat down to work and couldn't remember why. You used to be able to lock in, to disappear into something for hours. Now you can't get through 10 minutes without your attention fracturing. That's not weakness. That's what happens when the world is designed to pull you apart. But there was a man who rebuilt his focus under conditions far worse than yours. He didn't just lose his concentration. He lost his sight. His name was Toda Seigen, a swordsman from 16th century Japan. And what he did in the dark is the most powerful lesson on focus ever recorded. Chapter 1. The Man Who Saw It Coming. Most people lose focus by accident. You don't plan to get distracted. You don't choose to scatter. It just happens, slowly, then all at once. You wake up tired. You open your phone before your eyes adjust to the light. By noon, you've responded to everything except what actually matters. By evening, you wonder where the day went. Toda Seigen understood something most people never do. He felt his sight failing long before the darkness came. And instead of panicking, he prepared. He began mastering the kodachi, a short sword, nearly half the length of a katana. Most warriors dismissed it. A shorter blade meant shorter reach. It seemed like a disadvantage. But Seigen saw it differently. A shorter sword demands precision over power. It forces the fighter to close the distance, to feel the opponent's breath, to rely on something deeper than sight. He built a skill designed to survive his own limitation before the limitation arrived. The lesson isn't about blindness. The lesson is that most people wait for focus to return on its own. They hope the distraction will stop. They wait for a quieter season. But Seigen didn't wait. He built a new way of seeing while he could still see. Don't wait until you've completely lost your concentration. Start rebuilding it now, before the darkness deepens. Chapter 2. When Everything Collapsed. There's a kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much you've worked. It comes from loss. From watching something you built fall apart. From reaching for someone who is no longer there. From realizing that the version of life you counted on no longer exists. That exhaustion doesn't respond to rest. It goes deeper than sleep can reach. In 1573, Oda Nobunaga's forces burned Ikejidani Castle to the ground. Seigen walked through the ashes and found his grandson's body. This was not just grief. This was the collapse of everything. His grandson had promised to guide him when the blindness finally came. That hand was gone now. Seigen withdrew from the world. He stopped teaching. He stopped training. He disappeared into silence. And then, he went completely blind. Broken by loss. Surrounded by darkness. Alone. Most people would have stopped there. Most people do stop there. But here is what makes Toda Seigen extraordinary. Not the comeback, not the victory that came later. What makes him extraordinary is that he went to the mountains by himself. Not to be found. Not to perform recovery. But to sit alone with what remained and decide what to do with it. The lesson isn't that grief ends quickly. The lesson is that grief, when you let yourself enter it fully, eventually becomes the ground you rebuild on. Your focus will not return while you are still fighting your own losses. Sometimes you have to go into the dark before you can find your way through it. Chapter 3. The Return No One Expected. There is a moment in every real recovery that looks nothing like recovery. It doesn't look triumphant. It doesn't look resolved. It looks like a blind old man in the mountains, swinging a wooden sword at nothing. That's what Seigen's nephew Toda Shigemasa saw when he finally climbed the mountain to find him. Not a broken man. Not a healed man. A man in the middle of the work. Practicing. Alone. In the dark. Not because anyone was watching. Not because there was a tournament coming. But because the sword was the one language he still knew how to speak. This is the part most people skip when they talk about rebuilding focus. They want the insight, the breakthrough, the moment clarity returns. But before any of that, there is just the return to the practice. Not perfectly, not confidently, just returning. Your focus will not come back through motivation. It comes back through the act of sitting down again, opening the work again, beginning again. Not because you feel ready, but because beginning is how readiness is built. Seigen didn't wait to feel like a swordsman again. He picked up the sword and let the feeling follow. Chapter 4. Sharper in the Dark. Here is the part that defies everything you think you know about limitations. After Seigen returned from the mountains, after the grief, the blindness, the silence, his lord doubted him. A blind warrior. An old man without sight. How could he still be a swordsman worth anything? So he ordered a test. Seigen was placed against Yumizu, a trained fighter of the Shinto Ryu school, armed with a staff over 3 feet long. The fight lasted seconds. Seigen closed the distance immediately, no hesitation, no calculation, and struck Yumizu across the hands, face, and torso with such speed that his opponent couldn't track the attacks. Yumizu fell. Bloodied, defeated, by a blind man with a wooden short sword. The court was silent. What happened in those mountains? This is what happened. When Seigen lost his sight, he was forced to develop everything else. He stopped relying on what was easy. He had to feel the shift of air before a strike. He had to hear the change in breathing before an attack. He had to build a sensitivity so precise that vision would have been a distraction. The limitation became the training. Most people treat their lack of focus as an obstacle to work around. But your scattered mind is showing you exactly where to rebuild. Not around the weakness, through it. The sharpest focus is built not in perfect conditions, but in the places where you have no choice but to pay attention. Chapter 5. One sword, one purpose. You're not unfocused because you're lazy. You're unfocused because you're trying to do too many things at once. You have 17 tabs open. 4 projects in progress. 3 identities you're managing simultaneously. And 100 small obligations that never fully leave your mind. Each one pulls a fraction of your attention. None of them gets all of you. This is not productivity. This is fragmentation with the appearance of motion. Toda Seigen could not afford fragmentation. A blind swordsman who divided his attention was a dead swordsman. He built his entire school, the Toda Ryu, around a single principle, the Kodachi. One weapon, one philosophy, one path. Not because the Kodachi was the best weapon for every situation, but because mastering one thing completely is worth more than understanding 10 things partially. He didn't cross-train to cover his weaknesses. He went deeper into the one thing he knew until depth itself became the advantage. This is what rebuilding focus actually looks like. Not learning to juggle more. Learning to put most things down. Ask yourself honestly, what is the one thing that, if you gave it your full attention, would make everything else either easier or irrelevant? That's your Kodachi. Everything else is noise. Chapter 6. The Discipline of Darkness. There's a version of focus that only works under ideal conditions. Quiet room. No interruptions. Perfect sleep. Empty inbox. That focus is fragile. The moment one condition changes, it collapses. Real focus, the kind Toda Seigen built, works precisely because it was built in the worst conditions. Blind. Aging. Grieving. He trained when he couldn't see the target. He practiced when he couldn't know if his form was correct. He refined his sensitivity in total darkness, with no feedback except what his body could feel. That kind of training doesn't just build skill. It builds a focus that is independent of conditions. Most people's attention is at the mercy of their environment. The phone rings and focus disappears. One bad email and the whole morning unravels. But when you train your attention deliberately, when you practice bringing your mind back over and over and over, it becomes something you own. not something you wait for. Seigen's blindness removed every comfortable shortcut, and in doing so, it built a kind of awareness that sighted opponents couldn't match. Your distractions are uncomfortable, but they are also training grounds if you decide to treat them that way. Every time you catch your mind wandering and bring it back, that is a repetition. Every repetition makes the return faster. This is how focus is rebuilt, not by eliminating distraction, but by strengthening the return. Chapter 7. What the darkness teaches. There are things you cannot learn in the light. You cannot learn patience in perfect conditions. You cannot learn presence when everything is comfortable. You cannot learn the depth of your own attention until you've had to find it in the dark. Toda Seigen became the greatest swordsman of his era not despite going blind, but because of what blindness demanded from him. The records say his school, the Toda Ryu, shaped some of the most important sword traditions in Japanese history, techniques still practiced centuries after his death. A lineage built by a blind man. Because blindness asked him a question that no opponent ever could. Who are you when you can no longer rely on what came easily? That question is yours too. Not about sight, but about the things you've relied on that are no longer working the way they used to. The world moves faster than your attention was designed for. The tools that once helped you focus now fragment you. The pace that once felt productive now feels like running in place. Something has changed. And the question underneath all of it is the same one Seigen faced. Who are you when the old way stops working? The answer is not found in optimization. Not in a new app, a new routine, a new system. It's found in going quiet. In going deep, in returning to the one thing that still feels true and giving it everything you have. Chapter 8. The Light After the Mountain. Toda Seigen did not become a legend because he overcame blindness. He became a legend because he let the blindness teach him. He came down from that mountain changed, not restored to who he was before. Something different, something more. A man who no longer needed his eyes to see what mattered. And this is the final lesson, the one that separates people who rebuild from people who just recover. Recovery brings you back to before. Rebuilding brings you somewhere new. You don't need to get your focus back to the way it was. That version of focus existed in a different life, with different pressures, different demands, different noise. You need to build the kind of focus that works now. In the life you actually have, with the limitations that are actually present. That means accepting what's gone, releasing the version of productivity you used to have, and building something more durable in its place. Seigen came down from the mountain and founded a school. He turned everything he'd learned in the dark into something he could give to others. What you rebuild, you own in a way you never owned what was given to you. The focus you build through resistance, through grief, through distraction, through darkness, is the focus that cannot be taken. So go to your mountain, not to escape, but to listen. To find the one thing still worth swinging at. And swing. If this video saved you even 10 minutes of research, the next one will save you hours. Subscribe and turn on notification. It's free and it's worth it.